For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. Drop the front time, bitch!
I've got to return some videotapes.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy. And judging by the way I'm dressed, I'm not rocking a mink coat, by the way. It's actually called the Patrick Bateman. I'm continuing the trend for this whole month for the festivities and the holidays and Christmas, breaking down all my favorite Christmas horror films. So you're joining me today for episode 39 on American Psycho. One of my favorite classic films. Hold on a second. Let me get this shit off. I am not no happy reindeer. I am the SaWGuy, right? So American Psycho, I know, to me, is a Christmas horror film because it was written up as a book and then later on released in a movie. And, if you read the book and if you've seen the movie, there's a couple scenes in the movie that takes place during Christmas. Well, in the book, there's a little bit more detailed into that. And, I'll break it down for you in this whole episode, so don't worry, I'll get to it. But anyways, long story short, it is a Christmas horror film to me. And if it's a Christmas horror film, fuck it. I'm going to put it right here on episode 39 for y'all. But anyways, some of you guys have probably heard of American Psycho. It's got a big cult following. Most people probably know it by the book versus the movie and vice versa and all that whole business. But American Psycho was a good film that was released by Lionsgate Films in 2000. And it starred a fresh new face, Christian Bale. And it's kind of funny because Christian Bale, he had been acting his whole life, but he never got like his own billing, like he never starred in his own film. And this was his first one that really put him on the map, right? And as I do in every episode, I'll break down, the whole movie, and I'll give you a little bit of tidbits, all that little stuff. And, without further ado, let's continue this, right? So anyways, as I said, yes, American Psycho was a book first before a movie. And as a book, it was written by Brent, Easton, Ellis. And it came out in 1991, and it was one of those, fucking phenomenal books. I mean, what Harry Potter is today was American Psycho back in 1991. The only problem is, though, with American Psycho is that it was so fucking well-written, but yet it was so brutal that they banned it, which sucked, right? I know the United States, they didn't get it until, a few years later, but in the European countries where it was first released, they released it, and then they banned it, and then they said, okay, hold on, you got to shrink wrap the shit out of it and just put the title, and then you can still sell it, right? Because they didn't want people to read the scenes. Go figure, right? But anyways, the whole story of American Psycho follows this wealthy businessman guy. He works on Wall Street. His name is Patrick Bateman, right? And it follows a lot of different themes in this. And I don't know why it built such a cult following. I know nowadays everybody makes memes and jokes and I was laughing because there was a scene in the movie where instead of them showing business cards, they show fucking Pokemon cards. It's fucking funny, right? But anyways, the film, in all seriousness, it takes place in the 80s, 1987 to be exact. I think in the book it was 1988, but I'll get through a little bit of the differences between the book and the movie as I go through it. So to break down the movie, it starts off where it shows, a group of these wealthy people sitting, at a fancy restaurant. They're eating their, it's a fancy restaurant because they're serving you finger food and charging you a shitload of money. And, they're all talking and everything, bullshitting. And then they're all like, oh yeah, that's not too bad. That's only $5.27. They're all putting their cards on the plate and shit. And I'm like, for finger food. Yeah, see, that's how you know they're pretty well off, right? After that, they go to a nightclub. They pay off the bouncer. They go in the club. Then you see Christian Bale. He's the main character. He doesn't introduce himself yet at the scene. But he goes up to the bar, tries to give tickets. They're all like, hey, can't use these anymore. It's $25. So he gives her the money, and as she turns around, he fucking says, you're a stupid bitch. I want to kill you and play around in your blood. Or stab you and play around in your blood. And I was like, what the fuck? The first 5 minutes, you're like, whoa, okay. And then she turns around, gives him the drinks, collects the money and all that shit, right? Then it introduces like his nice apartment. It's all nice and clean. It's all white and black. All, I guess you could say modern for 1987, right? It shows him wake up, do his normal routine, and then he starts... What I love about this film is that they follow it closely to the book, like with his narration. The narration in the movie is basically Patrick Bateman, like, talking in his head, right? So he wakes up, and then he tells him, you know, who he is. You know, he says, hey, I'm Patrick Bateman. I'm 27 years old. I live da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And, you know, he starts talking about his morning routine. And, you know, there's a lot of different themes in this film, you know, that it follow. First and foremost, when they start describing Patrick Bateman, he's very OCD. He wakes up and he goes, if my face is all puffy, I'll put on an ice pack. As I do my crutches, I could do 1,000. You know? And then it shows how he gets in the shower, does his normal routine, and then he's like, well, I don't wash myself, you know, with just any old soap. I have to use a hydro cleanser and this and exfoliating pore cleaner. And then when I get out, I don't use any alcohol because alcohol dries out the skin. So I put on a face mask. And then he's still describing himself. And one of the favorite scenes, you know, in the beginning that I liked was once the face mask is dry, he starts peeling it off. And then he starts describing himself. There's an ideal Patrick Bateman, but I am simply not there. And then he rips it right off, which I was like, oh shit, this is a good build-up already, right? You gotta remember that this film is close to 2 hours. But they did it very good for 2 hours. And, you know, that's not including, like, the deleted scenes or anything. Because there was a few that would have made a better sense. But, you know, I'll get to that later. But anyways, once that's all done, then all of a sudden you hear the fucking cheesiest song that's basically in every film. You know, it's Walking on Sunshine. And he's listening to it, I guess, from his old Walkman. And he's walking down the office, right? Goes in, sees his secretary, and, you know, sits down at his desk. And she's all telling him about his appointments. He tells her, you know, hey, cancel this. Hey, make a reservation for this restaurant and that, you know. Then it shows he's just chilling there, right? And, you know, what's funny about this is that, you know, in the 80s you would think, okay, big wealthy businessman, he has a computer at his desk. No, he just has a fucking desk with, like, fancy stuff on it. So this whole movie really doesn't show him do much work. And they never describe what he did. But it was more or less, he worked on Wall Street doing something. I don't know if it was... I guess you could say like stocks and trading and all that shit. But anyways, he worked for this company. And anyways, him and his buddies that, you know, they showed in the beginning, you know, they're all hanging out. Then he's starting to wear glasses and shit. And then, no. Wait, I passed that part. Wait. So anyways, he's talking to his secretary. He leaves and then, you know, then you find out that he's taking a cab and then he's talking about his fiance. And he's trying to listen to Robert Palmer's, Simply Irresistible. And that's another thing that I loved about this film. They had a great fucking soundtrack. This whole movie had a budget of $7 million, and they spent at least like $4 million of it just to get all the rights to play this music, which is fucking crazy. But it worked out. I mean, the music really made this film, right? So it goes into like how he's talking to his fiance. She's like, okay, we're gonna do it, Patrick. We're gonna do it. Who's played by Reese Witherspoon, who at the time, she was, she was big, but not too big, you know, and so I was kind of surprised that she was in the film, but she was only in it for very little. But anyways, you know, she's trying to say, well, we should get married. He's like, no, I can't take the time off. You know, that was the funniest shit on there that I saw. And then, you know, what kind of blew me away is that they threw this little subtle difference between from the book and the movie. And when he said that, she basically said, well, your dad basically owns half the company, so you can get time off whenever you want. How come you want to work? And he tells her, because I want to fit in, right? And what I thought was crazy is that in the book, they don't say that his dad owns the company that he works for. They just said that he's a wealthy man, you know? So I thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit that they had between the book and the movie, right? So they get to the restaurant, and he's narrating to himself again, like, yeah, when we get there, I thought I was going to have a breakdown because, you know, we're not going to get a good seat at this restaurant. And, you know, to my surprise, we did get a good seat. So, you know, he's sitting there, and then all of his other buddies are there. And what's crazy is that they have two other people that he just barely met. And then he's talking about, like, his buddy, like Timothy and all these other people. And he's like, oh, yeah, and this is Lewis. He's the biggest doofus in the office. And I believe my fiance is having an affair with my friend, which I don't care about. But, you know, the doofus, I'm having an affair with his wife. Like, it was this whole weird thing going on. I was like, what the fuck? So it's kind of hard to follow the story unless you actually sit and watch it, right? And then you find out they had these basic conversations, you know. After the whole dinner scene, then, he goes to the ATM. He sees this lady on the side of him. And, he's kind of attracted to her. So he goes up to her as they're, getting close to a crosswalk. He looks at her, says hi. She says hi. They walk. And then all of a sudden, it flashes to a scene where he's already at the cleaners. And he's arguing with these people because they don't understand English about cleaning the blood stain off these sheets. And then they're trying to tell him, use bleach. He's like, no, you don't use fucking bleach. I thought, because it plays a lot on the aspect of Patrick Bateman, like his mental state of things, his mental state of mind, I guess I should say, because he's very OCD. He's very, I guess you could say narcissistic in a sense. But then you start thinking like, what the hell? Why does he have like red all over his sheets? And then it shows that he goes into his work. Now, this is the part that I meant to get to, the Pokemon card part. So he's sitting there, and out of all things, they're all talking shit and everything, and they're talking about this big account that Paul Allen got. Paul Allen is actually played by Jared Leto. Yep, you have the old Batman and the new Joker in this film, which is fucking funny, right? But anyways, they're all talking, and, Paul Allen, he's like the big shot. He's like, no can do, I got a reservation at Dorsia. Dorsia is like their fanciest restaurant, and only the exclusive people could get in. And Patrick Bateman, being as wealthy as he is, he was very shallow with things, He wanted to have the best of things, and he wanted to be, better than everybody else, right? And when they were all bullshitting, and then Paul Allen left, they started showing their cards. He's like, check this out. Just came out, And then his buddy showed his other one, and, he was getting kind of pissed, because you could hear in the narration where he's like, oh my God, why does he prefer his over mine? That's that's bullshit, right? So they all start looking at it and showing their cards. And then he's very obsessive with Paul Allen. He wants to get into what Paul Allen is doing, right? So he asks him, well, let me see his card. And then he picks up his card, and then he's just like shaking because he's so pissed. And, he's like, oh my God, it's even got a watermark. Look at that engraving. So he basically plays it off with him that he plays it off with Paul Allen that he's somebody else. And then he even says it himself. He goes, he thinks that I'm this doofus, Mark Halverson. And, he basically said that because, they go to the same barber. And he was very narcissistic at this part because he's like, but my haircut's better. There's a lot of little dark humor in this. And it's funny because a film like this, you would think it's not to be humorous, but it has subtle dark humor in it. And that's what, I guess, gave it its charm and its cult following, right? So as the film continues, he finally, they go to a Christmas party, which is where the Christmas ties into this episode, right? And as he's there, his wife or his fiance comes in and she shows him a potbelly pig. They put on the fucking reindeer antlers without him ever even knowing. Then he sees Paul Allen, so he goes and talks to him. And he goes, hey, let's go out to eat. And he's like, all right, Halverson, I'll see you later, And his fiance's like, why the hell is he calling you that? And then, he brushed it off like, oh, mistletoe alert. It was a Christmas party. Then they show that he finally goes to this lunch place to go eat with him, right? And Paul Allen, he's pissed because he's like, they're wealthy people. They want to be eating at a place where there's a shitload of people, I don't know why. Go figure. So they go to this Mexican restaurant. They're eating food. And he gets them fucking lit. Like, he keeps giving them, beer, or not beer. He gives them a martini. He gave him a Corona there because there's a scene where they were talking shit. And Paul Allen, he doesn't know that Patrick Bateman's Patrick Bateman. He still thinks that he's Halverson. So he's like, oh yeah, Patrick Bateman, what a loser. Then he's like, oh yeah, another drink, And this is where it gets the iconic scene. Where he finally takes him back to his place. And then Paul Allen's just shit-faced drunk. Like, oh yeah, And he's talking about Huey Lewis in the news. And, that's when he starts to talk about, this new stuff was a little too new wave for me. But when they came out with this album, it was fucking amazing. Goes in the bathroom, buttons up and everything. And a fucking raincoat. Has all the sheets all laid out so he doesn't fucking get blood all splattered all over. And then, he plays the music. And he plays it super loud because, Paul Allen doesn't know what he's going to do. And he has the axe right behind him the whole time. Then all of a sudden, he's telling him about the band. And then he's like, hey, Paul! Hits him with a fucking axe. And then he's like, try getting a Dorsia now, you fucking stupid bastard. And just snaps and just chops him up. After that, he's just like in disgust. He sits down on his couch, has a cigar. And then it shows the scene. He takes the body out. And, he has it like in this fancy, designer bag. Which is kind of cool because the the fact is, like, they had a lot of, in the book, they say a lot of, like, high-end names. And in the movie, they don't say so much of it. I mean, there's a few of them that they actually said, which was pretty cool, because it's free advertisement for them, But a lot of these people, they backed out because they heard about the book being so violent. So, as they could be one designer, but then they're saying it's something else, right? It's weird. I don't know why. And that's why I thought it was kind of cool when he was putting the bag in. He sees Lewis, the guy he's, messing around with his wife. And he's basically, Lewis is like, oh my God, where did you get that bag? And he's like, St. Paul and John Couillard, or some fancy shit like that, right? Then it shows he goes into Paul Allen's place to kind of make it look like he, went off on a business trip, right? And when he gets there, he's talking to himself, very narcissistically, like, yeah, it has a view over Central Park, and it's better than mine, Then later on, it shows, it delves in more into his madness, where he gets, like, really obsessive about things. Then he's just kind of, like, relaxed, and then that's when there's a detective that comes in, played by William Dafoe, of all fucking people, Detective Kimball. He comes in and starts asking him, hey, when was the last time you seen Paul, da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, well, I don't know much about Paul. He was in Yale, I was in Harvard, that Yale thing. And then Kimball, him being the detective, he starts throwing things out where he's like, okay, tell me what school is he from again? He's like, I already told you. He goes, yeah, but I want to see if you know. And then, Patrick Bateman, he played it cool, right? After that, he was like, fuck it. Then he starts to go hang out and do other crazy shit. And, well, not crazy shit. He, later on, he wants to set, like, Paul Allen up like he's still there. So he goes and picks up a prostitute, calls for another prostitute. This is where it kind of gets exploited, But what's crazy is that he takes him back to his place. He starts talking to him about Phil Collins. They film doing their thing or whatever. There was a little kind of tidbits on this where, one of the girls afterwards, when she was asleep, she touches his watch and he goes, don't touch the watch. But in the book, he says, don't touch the Rolex, which I thought was kind of crazy because, Rolex want nothing to do with this film. And, because of all the violent nature and everything. But this film wasn't as violent. I mean, it built up to a lot of the imagination. It would build up to it and then it would cut to the scene like after, like scene missing. It's fucking crazy, right? So, he gets up, he pulls out his drawer, and then he's looking at all these gears and shit. And then they're all like, okay, can we go? I'm not done yet. And then it shows, like, it doesn't show anything. And then it shows he opens the door, he gives them the money, and they fucking walk out stumbling and shit. And you see that they're all cut up. And then it shows that him and his buddies, they go and they hang out and shit. And, they're just talking regular bullshit or whatever, And then all of a sudden, Lewis, the doofus, comes in, shows him the card. And then this is where Patrick Bateman starts to kind of, starts little by little losing it, going into his madness. In the beginning, he was more calm and chill. And then he starts to kind of go down. He sees, his coworker with it, and then he snaps. And then he snaps at his friends, puts on his gloves, and he's going to try to kill him while he's taking a piss on the urinal. And all of a sudden, he puts his hands around him. And the biggest twist in this was his coworker, Lewis, who's married to, the guy that he's, well, the guy. Lewis, his wife, is messing around with Patrick Bateman. He's married, right? And they implied that he was bisexual, which was crazy. He's like, oh, Patrick, I was waiting for you. And Patrick, to his disgust, he was just like shocked, like, what the hell do I do? And then he's like kissing his hand. And then it came up with his best excuse out of this whole film that I love, that, it's a quote that he was like all shocked. And he's like, what? Because he's asking him, where are you going? Patrick, he tells him, I gotta return some videotapes. It's just, that's a classic line. If you ever say one line out of all fucking American Psycho, it's either, I gotta return some videotapes, or you talk about Dorcia, But anyways, it shows that, he's running out, and then he's like looking at him, he blows him a kiss, then he's like, call me. Then he's like kind of snapping a little bit, It dives in more into the madness. And then it shows later on that there's different scenes that he goes, he was so pissed that, he goes to this alleyway. He sees this homeless guy, and then he's kind of being a dick to him, where he's like, hey, I'll help you out here, And he was just kind of fucking with him, like, well, what happened? And the guy's like, I lost my job. Well, how'd you lose your job? Insider trading? Then he tells him, oh, I'm just joking. The fucked up part on this guy had a dog. And, Patrick Bateman, he was like, you smell like fucking filthy shit. And he has his briefcase, pulls it out, and he shanks the guy. and then he shanks the dog or kicks the dog or something. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck? I mean, that's probably the most intense scene that you'll see in this film, based from the book. That was pulled from the book, because in the book, holy shit, man, the book had so much more brutal details of what happened in that scene. But it just showed just a glimpse, right? So, after all that's going in, you know, he decides, okay, well, I'm going to call a friend that I know. And he called that friend, and he called the first prostitute over. And she was like, well, I don't know. I mean, last time I had to go to the hospital, and he offered her double money. But this time, you know, he was still playing off the fact that he was Paul Allen. But then instead of going to his place, they went to Paul Allen's place. Then they filmed, you know, a scene and did their thing or whatever, you know. And then, well, she's in the bathroom. You know, he snaps and kills one girl. And then he goes to chase after her. And she kicks him in the face. And he's like, not the face, you fucking bitch. And this is the scene where it shows he snaps, you know, because she's running out, trying to get out of this fucking apartment. Every door she opens, there's fucking dead bodies and shit all over, right? And he just fucking snaps. And, you know, he gets a chainsaw, and he's butt-ass naked. And he has fucking Nikes on, out of all things. He has Nike running shoes, or some kind of running shoes. So he's naked, running down this hall, chasing after her with a chainsaw, right? And that's where she gets to the steps, and then it's all running down. He pulls out the chainsaw, drops it, and then it smacks her right smack dab. And then that's when he was screaming, ah, you know, trying to be stupid, right? But after that scene, then it showed that, you know, his assistant kind of had a thing for him. You know, she was a single girl or whatever, and she always had, like, this little crush on him, right? And so, as he's kind of, like, chilling in his office, you know, he has the sunglasses on. He's like, you want to go to dinner today? She's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm so excited. Let's go wherever. He fucking picks up the 1980 cell phone, calls Dorsey, and they're like, yeah, we don't have no reservations. And he played it off like they did. But there was a thing with it, though, is that he was trying to go after her and use her as a pawn so he can, you know, not torture her, but I think he had eyes to do harm to her, right? So he tells her, hey, after you get off, change, meet me at my place. So it shows she goes to his place, and then they start talking, and, you know, he has all the weapons and shit laid out, and then he gives her, like, ice cream, and he's like, you want a sorbet? So she's eating it, you know, straight from the cup, and they're talking. And then, you know, he pulls out a nail gun, and he puts it, like, right behind her, like he's gonna snap, right? But something happened. You know, it was weird. He had, like, this human instinct, like, he couldn't hurt her. And then when she asked if she was still dating anybody, he was like, no. Then his fucking answering machine goes on, and then you hear his fiance, you know, talking about how, like, hey, you're my Patrick Bateman, remember that, Mr. Businessman, or some stupid shit like that. And then that's when he tells her, you should go. And then she's like, really? He's like, yeah, if you stay, you're going to get hurt. She thought it was, like, a mental thing, like, he was going to hurt her and break her heart, but he meant it in a way where he was going to do harm, like, physical harm to her. And so, as she's leaving, she basically tells her, like, don't forget your meeting that you have tomorrow, and then she walks out. Then it shows later on, after that scene, you know, he goes in, I guess it was at the nightclub, you know, him and his buddies, because this movie, it's crazy. It shows a lot of drug paraphernalia in it, where they show them snorting coke and doing crazy shit like that. And then it goes later on into the scene where, you know, he's eating dinner with his fiance, and then he's just, at this point, he fucking snaps. He's just like, I'm done. Then he, you know, she's talking to him, and then he was like, no, I'm fucking done. She's like, no, you're joking. And then she goes, well, your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. And he goes, I thought about it, and you could have them. She's like, you serious? He's like, yeah, I'm serious. Then she starts to make a scene. And then, you know, with him, he's like, I'm done. I said what I did. And then she's like, where are you going? Then he pulls out the fucking best line of all time. I gotta return some videotapes. I fucking laugh at that scene because the way he says it. Fucking Christian Bale is amazing at this movie, you know. But anyways, it shows later on he goes to an ATM. He's going to pull more cash out. It shows that, it kind of shows you like his mindset. Like he puts a ATM card in. He sees this kitten. He picks up this kitten. And then this ATM machine says, feed me a kitten. It's kind of like, it plays on the viewer like that he's crazy, but he's not crazy, right? And then all of a sudden, as he's putting the cat in, the cat wouldn't go. So he pulls out a fucking Glock, and then he aims it, and then this old lady's like, what are you doing? He fucking shoots the old lady. And then all of a sudden the cops come. And then, you know, he tucks it in, he starts running all around. And they call this Patrick Bateman's rampage, right? Because it basically was. you know, he's running around trying to run for the cops. And all of a sudden he sees that they all pull up, and then he shoots them. And by the 5th shot, it blows up all the cars and everything. And then it's just like little by little, he's starting to snap more and more. He goes into one building, and they said, oh, hey, you need to sign in. He kills that guy. Then he runs out, and then all of a sudden he sees a janitor come around, and then he runs back in, kills the janitor. Then he goes to another building, and this guy he didn't kill, because he's like, he looks like he's going to pull out his gun, then he's like, pulls out his pen, like, you know, running, you know, he's trying to catch his breath and shit. And basically he was running to his office, and he saw that there was this helicopter coming after him, right? So he runs up to his office, he's sitting there, and that's when he has like the full breakdown where he confesses to his lawyer, where he's like, I killed this guy, I killed a couple of prostitutes, and I even ate their brains. You know, and it was like, what the fuck? Like, he was like, they didn't show that in the movie, but I know if you've read the book and then see the movie, it makes sense, you know? Because he describes a lot of scenes that, you know, they didn't show in the movie for obvious reasons, right? And, you know, after he confesses, he's like, so if I'm around, I'll see you at Harry's bar. I guess I'm a pretty sick guy, you know? Then it shows, you know, the next day he gets up, showers, he goes to, you know, work, and then he kind of literally lost it. And then that's when he goes and calls, what was it? He calls his assistant and tells her, hey, cancel everything. And then she's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? He's like, stop being so fucking sad. And, you know, he's just completely gone, right? He goes to Harry's, and then he talks to his lawyer, and his lawyer thinks he's somebody else. And he's like, no, I'm Patrick Bateman, you stupid bastard. I know I did all this. I chopped up Paul Allen. And they're all like, no, that's bullshit. And he's like, I don't think this is funny. And he's like, well, why isn't it? And then he goes, because I just had lunch with Paul Allen 10 days ago in London. And then he was like, what the fuck? You know? And then this is where it's like the M. Night Shyamalan fucking twist. Like, whoa, how can this guy go have lunch with Paul Allen 10 days ago after Patrick Bateman already killed him, right? Then it starts to mess with you a little bit. Then he goes and sits down. Then it shows the Iran-Contra affair thing, the speech that Ronald Reagan was making. So it basically puts a timestamp that it was in 1987. And his buddies are all talking to him and everything. He's all sweating and everything. And then he's kind of like talking to himself. He's like, I know that there's no... Or he said something. But it basically breaks down into like he knows that he did something wrong, but he doesn't know if it really happened or not. And then the movie ends. And what's crazy about this film is that they never explain the ending. There's been so many YouTube videos like trying to explain the ending, like did he do it, did he not do it? Even in the book, it plays a lot on that aspect. And back to what I was saying on the book is fucking brutal. Oh man, like, you know, I'll give you an example of one of the scenes, right? When he first started, you know, going crazy, he goes into a zoo and then he stakes out, like, trying to hurt children. Which is like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, they actually describe everything, all of it in the book. Versus in the movie, they don't show any of that, you know? Which is why a lot of people were shocked that they were going to turn this book into a movie, right? It's like, how the fuck are you going to do that? But it was crazy, you know? It really is. Because it's one of those aspects with the fact that, you know, it's not like Stephen King's book of It, and then, you know, you go and redo it as your own, or you try to copy it word for word, because you can't. Because, I mean, you can't film something like that's brutally intense. I mean, you can put it on a book, not in a movie, right? Completely different. Well, anyways, it's the way that they did the movie, because you had Brent, Easton, Ellis, the writer of the book. He was the screenwriter for this movie. And then they also had a really good director, Mary Herron. And she was the one who directed a lot of the main, you know, iconic scenes, which she did a damn good job. And, you know, a lot of people don't give Christian Bale enough credit because this film really kind of put him out there, because after this film, that's when he started getting, like, the bigger ones, you know. And then eventually, that's when they cast him as Batman, and then, you know, the rest is history, right? But I find it interesting that Christian Bale, his last film that he did before this film, he played Jesus in, like, one of the greatest stories ever told, which was kind of weird. I was like, what? How do you go from being Jesus to American Psycho, like the Patrick Bateman? Like, that's that's freaking weird, right? But this film, it came out in 2000, and Lionsgate Film at the time, they had released a couple of films. They were kind of like the New Line Cinema of the 80s, you know? They released a couple of films. They did okay. They have the name, but most people don't know them. When they released this film, they released it first in January 21st of 2000. They did it as a Sun or what do they call it? The film festival or the Sundance Film Festival. And if it screened good, which it really did, they were going to put it in theaters. And then they put it in theaters in April 14th of that year. Like literally 3 months later. And, you know, it did okay in theaters. It really took off when they released it in home video. I guess you could say, yeah, there was VHS at the time. So they had a VHS of it. They had a DVD of it. But then there was the deleted scenes, right? They didn't release the deleted scenes until they did a Blu-ray a few years back. And some of it would make sense because it's not like the actual brutal scenes of this, but it actually shows and explains a little bit more about Patrick Bateman. Was he crazy? Was he not crazy? Was he just talking to himself? Did he dream a lot of these thoughts? Because in the ending of the film, you see that there's his secretary. After she gets off the phone with him, she goes in and looks around at his desk, and then that's when she pulls out his book, his daily planner or whatever. And then that's basically all the murders that he did in the movie is all drawn out. So, you know, you're led to believe as the viewer, was he really crazy? Did he just dream that? You know? I mean, there was a lot of cool little tidbits on that. And it's, you know, I'm not a fan of M. Night Shyamalan films, not by any stretch, you know? But I love the twist that they did in American Psycho, right? And American Psycho had such a, you know, buzzed about name. You're going to laugh at this. They actually did a fucking sequel to this. And I don't know why they ever did a sequel. But long story short, they got the girl who played the voice of Meg off of Family Guy. What's her name? Mila Kunis. And they had William Shatner star in it. And basically they filmed it as one movie. And then they, you know, released it as American Psycho 2. Had nothing to do with, you know, Patrick Bateman other than one scene where, you know, he was surprisely killed, you know. It was weird, right? What I thought was interesting is that FX, the production company that does American Horror Story, they wanted to do a TV show, which would have been badass, you know. It would have been like an older Patrick Bateman in his 50s, and he's raising an apprentice to be exactly like him, which would have been cool. But, you know, they announced that back in 2013. Now we're at the end of 2018. I don't think it's going to happen. You know, and that's sad because there's such a huge cult following. And you would think for a cult following for a film, especially a film like this that's based off a crazy book, and then it's 2 hours. I mean, you know, it's there is some long drawn out parts in the movie, but if you actually stay, you know, awake and pay attention, it's a really good film. It's very well written, very good dialogue. The acting is phenomenal. They got big names in there. I mean, William Dafoe, you know, like, who the fuck would get William Dafoe to show for 2 scenes? American Psycho did. You know? Reese Witherspoon, she was in that, you know? Jared Leto, you know? Jared Leto, he is, you know, obviously well known for 30 Seconds to Mars' band, but I know he also plays the new Joker and stuff like that, but it's kind of crazy. Like, this film came out in 2000, so it's 18 years old, but it still stands up well today. Because, you know, they did very well in the period, you know. A lot of it, obviously, the movie takes place on New York. As I said, they filmed it with a $7 million budget. So they did a lot of the shooting in Toronto, but they did some of the iconic scenes in New York. You know, obviously to cut budgets and stuff. And what I thought was also interesting, before I end this episode, is that Christian Bale was not the original person to play this, right? I know, I'm mind blown at this shit, right? When this book rights got bought and, you know, to be turned into a film, they wanted Oliver Stone and they wanted Leonardo DiCaprio. Obviously, that would have been well over the $7 million budget. So they said, fuck it, we're going to get somebody else. So that's when they got Mary Herron. And then, you know, Christian Bale, he was still up and coming, still pretty young. You know, he was really 27 in that film, by the way. He basically said, here's my card. I'm interested to do this film. Let me know what you guys think, right? Originally, Leonardo DiCaprio dropped out. Then they wanted Ewan McGregor. They wanted Ewan McGregor because he had gotten famous for doing Star Wars. So he got his name out, right? Christian Bale and Ewan McGregor, they were best friends. So he said, hey, do me this favor. Let me do the film. And, you know, he did him that favor, backed out of it so Christian Bale could do it. And, you know, the film was fucking amazing. And as I said, they spend that out of that $7 million budget, they spend $4 million for the fucking music. Which, if you look at the music lineup, you have Depeche Mode, you have fucking New Order, you have Phil Collins. They were gonna have Whitney Houston, but she backed out. She was like, you ain't putting my shit on there, you know, because everyone thought it was gonna be extremely violent, you know, but it wasn't. And what I thought was interesting was the fact that it did its own different take. You know, it's two different worlds when you read the book and then when you watch the movie. But, you know, don't take my word for it. If you get a chance to see it, I know it's on Amazon Prime right now. Check it out. I mean, it's a really good film. Let me know in the comments below if you guys enjoyed American Psycho. If you're enjoying these Christmas horror films that I'm bringing to you guys. I got, you know, judging from my original, you know, trailer that I did for all my Christmas horror films, it's down to the next 2 films. I'm not going to spoil it here for this episode to let you guys know. You'll find out soon enough. But anyways, hope you're all enjoying, you know, your Christmas holiday, enjoying all the horror films out there. And as always, you know, once I'm done and out, you know, where it goes, right?
Bow down to the